We strive, we who are happy and free. Birds of a feather with laughter together, scout rangers of fortune are we. We sing, greeting the night with a song. Laughing at danger, we fight like a panther. We conquer our hardships away. Shadows to hide us and bright stars to guide us the night we roam. No one can find us wherever we choose to roam.
Good morning. Good morning. Let us start our webinar by singing the national anthem. Let us all rise for the singing of the Philippine national anthem.
Pasulong! Good! Kulay! Go! Tonghol! Kulay! Baba! Kulay!
Welcome everyone to the second session of our Vanguard Leadership Series 2. I am Camille Chua from the Vanguard class of 2015, and I will be your
Good!
and I will be your host for today. Here is our program flow. First, we, the UP Vanguard Makati chapter, would like to welcome you to this event. Then we will have our resource speaker, Dr. Lizan Perante-Calina, to talk about the imperatives of foresight and futures thinking in education, also how this concerns our national security. Then we will listen to some insights and reaction from Dr. Cabalza, which is followed by an open forum, the question and answer portion. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone to maintain a respectful environment at all times. If you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A icon that looks like this on the screen. Now we have our UP Vanguard Makati Chapter Commander, Vanguard Kenneth Hartigan Go, from the class of 1982 to give the welcome remarks.
Thank you, Camille. A pleasant good morning to everybody. Welcome, distinguished speaker, Dr. and Dean of DAP, Dr. Lizan Perante-Calina, and our reactor for this morning, Dr. Chester Cabalsa. And welcome, cadets and students from the University of the Philippines and other universities. Let me begin by saying that 3 days ago, on the 24th of November, the news article came out and said that according to World Bank, 90% of our children in far-flung areas cannot read. And this is a warning call and very dangerous as well. Education is really integral part of our national security. Without education, a nation becomes weak. Now, reading might be a surrogate for educational level assessment. However, it also sadly reflects the realities of things that contribute to national security: poverty, systems failure, the lack of comprehensions, and the ability to acquire skills for the future, how to progress in life. And overall, if you look at education, it also instills values and ethics. So if reading is poor, what else is going to damage our society and hurt security for the nation? I'd like to, again, welcome everybody. A good morning. So I hope you will stay on and listen to this great talk and be part of the discourse with questions and answers and discussion. Thank you. Mabuhay. Back to you now, Camille.
We are extremely glad to have cadets from different ROTC units. So welcome cadets, cadet officers, vanguards, students, and friends. It is indeed our honor to bring all of you together to this event. Our national security concerns everyone equally, and it is important that we understand that this, especially as ROTC cadets. Let me introduce you to our resource speaker today. She has a master's degree and a doctorate degree in public administration from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. She had numerous training on various executive courses from the Japan International Cooperation Agency, the National Graduate Research Institute for Policy Studies, and the Leadership Academy for Development of Stanford University. She finished her Futures Masterclass at the National University of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Currently, she is the Dean of the Development Academy of the Philippines, Graduate School of Public and Development Management. She is the President of the Philippine Society for Public Administration, and she is also the President of the Philippine Futures Thinking Society, and one of the advisory board members of the Washington Global Institute. Under her leadership as the Dean, she introduced the first ever certificate course on the futures thinking in the Philippines with credit units. Let us give our warm welcome to Dr. Lizan Perante.
Thank you so much, Camille. My warmest greetings to Vanguard Dr. Kenneth Hartigan Go, Dr. Chester Cabalza, cadets, cadet officers, vanguards, and co-learners. My pleasure to be part of this learning journey. So this morning, I'll be sharing with you another lens in order for us to really look at the imperatives of education towards national security. So let me share my slide to all of you. And this slide will lead us, of course, to the theme that have been shared to us on the imperative of national security in education. And the title of my presentation is about foresight education. That is very specific, and I'll be giving you an overview of what is foresight and what is futures thinking, and how it is important in education, and of course in leading us towards a preferred national security that everyone would like to have. So this presentation will somehow contextualize leadership and education in a 21st century era towards national security. What is the importance of incorporating and embedding features thinking in capacitating learners for creating features-ready society? And like what Dr. Kenneth mentioned a while ago, ethics and values are important things towards national security. That's why I'll be also discussing with you in brief frenetic leadership. And what is this frenetic leadership all about? And that is anchored in one framework that I'll be introducing to you later on. Another thing that I'd like to share with you is the promotion of a culture of anticipatory, agile, and collaborative education leadership. And this is about the indigenization of our framework when we use features thinking and foresight in the Philippines. And it is there in features leadership and governance framework. And of course, this will give somehow a practical application to the current and future pandemics. What's important here is that there's practicality and geared towards functionality. So something that we learn in school, and at the same time, this learning will be applied in our daily activities as individuals living in this kind of society. So let me begin with the context. And the context, of course, is national security. And according to this document, National Security Policy for Change and Well-being of the Filipino People, from 2017 to 2022, and that will end next year. And I think the purpose of this also is really for us to use foresight and features thinking as a lens on recrafting our national security policy towards our preferred future. So when we talk about national security, it talks about everything. It talks about the human basic rights of every Filipino. So the right to well-being, the right to common good, the right to a healthy ecology and environment, and everything else. So it is a state of or condition wherein the people's welfare, well-being, ways of life, government, and its institutions, territorial integrity, sovereignty, and core values are enhanced and protected. And as citizens of this country, we have the right to all of these type of activities, no? And also as citizens, we have the rights and obligations as well to provide a safe place for everyone. And the vision, of course, of the government is to become a country with national security where Filipinos are confident of its place in the community of nations. But in moving towards this direction, we need to have strong institutions. And how do we promote strong institutions? So it's really all about leadership. It's all about ethics and values. And again, we have to look at our culture as Filipinos. So there are national security interests, and these interests cover a lot of things: public safety, law and order, and justice. We have that, the social political stability, the territorial integrity, economic solidarity and sustainable development, ecological balance, cultural cohesiveness, moral and spiritual consensus, international peace and cooperation. So all of these are stated or articulated in our constitution. And that is the mother law of the land. And if we take a look at closely with our Constitution, 1987 Constitution, under our preamble, that is Article 2, it talks about the values that we need in this society. So the values that we have to promote to have a secured state, a secured community. And with this century, with this era, the 21st century, are also faced by different challenges. Actually, these challenges are strong, that we need to have another lens or handle in order for us to really cope with the demands and challenges of the society, globally, locally, speaking as well. So there are two types of environment that we have to look into. Now, the first one, of course, the internal environment. So what are these internal areas or aspects that we need to look into? With the law and order, of course, internal armed conflicts, terrorism and transnational crimes, economic and social threats. And if we look at external environment, we have overlapping territorial claims and maritime domain issues, global and regional geopolitical issues, global uncertainty, and proliferation of WMD. So a lot of things and a lot of issues and challenges that are now right in front of us. And these are not only low-lying fruits, issues, and challenges. There are also emerging trends that we need to look into. And this one really talks about the unspoken and the unknown. So in learning all of these things, we need to incorporate or embed futures thinking and foresight in education towards national security. Other strategic issues and challenges are here, like a rising threat of cybercrime, climate change that's very serious, institutional concerns, and among others. So if we relate this also to SDGs, we can take a look at those 17 SDGs and somehow realize and make a composite framework on how are we going to realize or achieve SDGs, our 17 Sustainable Development Goals and other pressing issues towards national security. But then again, if we discuss security and development, we take a look at a very big or comprehensive definition of that, although there's no size fits all definition for that. But development and security looks at human security. And in this framework introduced by Dr. Ed Gonzalez, former DAP president, he talks about 3 areas when it comes to human security. So we have the freedom from fear, conflicts, violence, crime, and that we need peace for that. He talks about freedom from one, poverty, infections, diseases, environment degradation, and that is all about development. And the freedom from indignity, discrimination, and exclusion, and that is about human rights. So this framework of Dr. Gonzalez is a very comprehensive framework looking at human security towards national security, of course. And when we talk about the national security, the stakeholders involved, of course, cover all of us in this society. So stakeholders from the grassroots community up to the policy makers and everyone in this community. So this is a very comprehensive framework that he introduced towards really looking at our preferred national security. And you all know that we live in a VUCA world, and we experience volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. But using futures thinking and foresight, we want to convert wicked problems into wicked opportunities. And how do we do that? We can use a lot of tools in order for us to paint in a bigger canvas the so-called art. And later on, I'll show you a video about this one. So again, the context here in this 21st century era is about COVID-19, the implications of COVID-19, the disruption, the discontinuity, and the disturbance. And according to Diamandis and Kotler, the future is faster than we think. And in this book, they talked about the 6 Ds of exponentials, the acceleration of the acceleration. Technology here is the main driver. And of course, we have to look at technology in the aspect that technology must be used as a tool. We need to maximize technology, but again, we have to incorporate ethics and values in using technology. So these are the 6 Ds of exponentials, are the growth cycle of exponential technologies: digitalization, the deception, disruption, demonetization, dematerialization, and democratization as well. So how are we going to maximize technology in a positive way towards the so-called Society 5.0, wherein the focus is, of course, the people or the citizens. So here in this slide, you see this metaphorical menagerie by Robert Hickson, and it's about the unspoken and the unknowns. We have the black elephant, we have the gray rhino, the black swan, the 1997 financial crisis, and other events that happened in the past, and the black jellyfish. COVID-19 is considered as black jellyfish according to experts. And this COVID-19 is an event that we know and understand because it's there in that emerging map of diseases for the past 30 years, but really turned out to be more complicated and uncertain than we expected. So here we are now on our second year, almost now moving towards the second year of COVID-19, and really the impact is so great that we were surprised on how to manage that. So the question also is, how are we going to foster an anticipatory, agile, and collaborative education leadership? Education is our passport towards development. Education is our passport towards employment, and education will really spell out development, and that's very important. And of course, with education, we are empowered, and by making us empowered, we have an open space to articulate our rights and interests, and through education we'll be able to achieve the national security that we want for our country. So here I'll be introducing to you Hiraya Foresight and Future Thinking to really pick your minds in creating features-ready society. This also be good if we'll have later on a deepening and how to use features thinking tools in order for us to have a practical session, and that is learning by doing. So I'd like to delve first on what is Education 5.0 using an anticipatory mindset. We need to look at the future as well. So here, as you can see, the Society 5.0 is a human-centered society that balances everything: economic advancement with the resolution of social problems by system that highly integrates cyberspace and physical space. And that's according to CEO of Japan. And the Society 5.0, of course, will lead us to a more comfortable life when we'll look forward to emerging events or emerging activities and trends. So by making a forward-looking society, it really breaks stagnation, wherein members of the community have mutual interest for each other, transcending the generations. And in transcending generations, we also talk about intergenerational fairness. And this intergenerational fairness doctrine is all about making this generation better for the next generation. And in the case of Oposa versus Factorian, it emphasized that we have to promote intergenerational responsibility doctrine, and that the young generation, you cadets and co-learners, you have a big role to play in really protecting this present generation in order for us not to sacrifice the future of the next generation. So in that Oposa versus Factorian case, that was a question about locus standi, or the legal standing of the petitioners, as they are not taxpayers and they are not of legal age, but they need to protect the environment. So the Supreme Court decided that even though they don't have the legal standing to file a case, they have the right to protect the interests of this generation for a better future and that will be beneficial to the next generation. So in this society 5.0, of course, people, things, and systems are all connected in cyberspace, and optimal results obtained by the use of AI, Internet of Things, no, and the other technology that we need in order for us to have the so-called technological convergence in a society where we live in. So Society 5.0 will bring about human-centered society. In many discussions that we have with international community as well, when we ask them to describe what is Society 5.0 and what is smart city all about, and this experience, frontliners from different countries, they answer that it should be human-centric, or it must be citizen-centric. So it's not really about technology working or the one that is managing us, but it's about us still, just maximizing technology as tools towards development. So education, so Society 5.0 as related to Education 5.0 is really all about the learner's agency. When we talk about learner's agency, it's all about empowering the learners to be equipped with knowledge and to be active members in their community. Active members talk about social responsibility of individuals. So we in this community, education community or knowledge institution community, we have a big role to play. And that is about really educating each one of us, empowering each one of us, and a valuable resource of support and positive influence for young people, wherein we really motivate each one of us to be part of the development of one community. So what's our way forward in really developing learners' imagination and creativity? So we need to enhance the quality of education training, promote non-formal and informal education. But for UNESCO, it's really about lifelong learning. We need to transform and expand skills acquisition for the world of work and provide alternative learning opportunities to vulnerable learners likewise. So we need to be inclusive. And as youth educators and part of this education community, we have the ability to shape leaders of the future in the best way for society to really build positive and inspired future generations. And we can design a society wherein it really promotes empowerment of the youth and empowerment of everyone in the community. So this is the focus of learners agency. And of course, when we talk about national security, we also look at the actors in governance, the government, the CSOs, the business sector. As we all know, government alone can't do it. So we need the private sector, the business sector, and other stakeholders in the community, the church, the fourth industry, the media, for example, the third sector of the society, and that is the CSOs and the NGOs, you as students, and everyone else in the community. So before I delve into other topics, I'd like you to join this Menti session first, and you can go to www.menti.com, and the code there is 6707. And I'd like Karen, my colleague here, to share the Menti session question. All right. So Karen, would you like to share the screen now? Okay, there you go. So for our Menti session, before we delve into futures thinking, I'd like you to answer this. Please describe your familiarity with futures thinking. So there you go. We have one entry already, and I have heard of futures thinking, but I'd like to learn more. That's great. And I have a good working knowledge of futures thinking and foresight. Wow, that's nice to hear that. And no knowledge at all. Yeah, don't worry. You can always explore. And it's futures thinking and foresight these two are not really for experts. No, it's for everyone because we have an innate ability to do foresight and futures thinking. The difference there is on how we exercise it. So it's always important that we have to have continuous learning and continuous exercise on how to do futures thinking and foresight. And in other countries, for example, in Singapore, which is near us, and also in Malaysia, it's really part of their culture. And everyone's there, of course, is exercising futures thinking and foresight, not only in school or in their offices, but in their daily lives. So, all right. So we got entries here. One, I have a good working knowledge of futures thinking and foresight. Please join us, and we'll be able to design more learning modules for this. I have heard of futures thinking, but I'd like to learn more. Yes, great. And no knowledge around 10. All right. So you just continue to enter your insights and perspectives on the question about your familiarity with futures thinking, and we'll consider that. And of course, this will be part of our leveling up when we introduce foresight and futures thinking to all of you. Right. So thank you, Karen, for sharing that. And of course, if you want to engage more, Karen will share with you the link to Futures Thinking. And in the Philippine Futures Thinking Society, we have so many activities like capacity building, wherein we have international speakers joining us. All right. So futures thinking is a 21st century competence. It's not new, right? It's not new. But, in the Philippines, it was introduced sometime in 1970s during the time of then President Marcos. And then in the late 80s, it was also introduced in early 2000. Yes, it was also introduced, but it did not really, it was not embedded in our in the government or in the education system until last year, sometime in June 2020, wherein the way we started futures thinking and foresight is the other way around, from the inside out, from the outside rather to inside. So meaning to say, it started from the private sector, and then the government, the government is now really pursuing this. So meaning to say that really government alone can't do it. Collaboration is very important in introducing new knowledge. So the outside to inside strategy here is very effective because it's more of a voluntary work. It's more of a public advocacy. Public administration is all about public advocacy. So that's one thing that we learned all throughout our program. So it's a 21st century competence or skill helpful for all of us, for development and public leaders, for students, and likewise for policy makers. And when we engage in futures thinking, it will contribute towards better decision, and that better decision will lead to institutional change, organizational change, and likewise individual. And if we use futures thinking as a lens, we may ask questions like what ifs, how might we, right? But there are simple questions likewise, like for example, what are the implications of COVID-19 to education and national security? What are the possible plausible, probable, and preferred features towards national security? And how will the future for the country's national security look like in the next 18 months, next 5, 10, or even 20 years? In other countries, they already have scenarios for 2050 on national security. And our experience with our military students last week or early this week was really great, was really awesome, because they were able to think on how to craft or build scenarios and gather intelligence towards that preferred feature. So, as I mentioned earlier, we are in a VUCA world, likewise in a tuna world, according to Skoblik of 2020. And he talks about turbulence, uncertainty, novelty, and ambiguity. But for Kedge Future School, we need to paint in a bigger canvas the so-called art, adaptive, resilient, and transformative. And that is really converting wicked problems into wicked opportunities. So again, I'd like to request Karen to share the screen for the video presentation from Kedge School. So this is really about painting the so-called art, being adaptive, resilient, and transformative for that matter. So Karen is now playing or trying to upload the video that we would like to watch in this Wicked Opportunities video.
I'm now screen sharing
All right,
for a bit.
Karen. Okay, so another, of course, problem that we are encountering is the so-called internet connectivity, right? So we have a number of issues there, and that is beyond our control. And while we are doing that and facing these challenges, of course, we need to cope with the demands of time. Okay, there you go. Right.
We live in an age of unprecedented volatility, complexity, and ambiguity, but very few know what to do about it. Governments are shifting, economies are in turmoil, technology is exploding, business models are falling and rising at the speed of light, and a new social reality is evolving by the minute. In this landscape, we've moved past ordinary problems into what are known as wicked problems. What makes them wicked? They don't have simple solutions. In fact, every simplistic attempt at a solution creates even more problems. So, what should we do? In the words of Albert Einstein, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The truth is, it isn't the rapidly changing landscape that is the real enemy, but rather our outdated mental maps that are more suited to a previous era. Businesses, organizations, innovators, and entrepreneurs need a new platform from which to operate. So where do we start? By learning that complexity actually offers us new ideas on how to tackle old problems. We admit, running towards growing complexity rather than away from it may seem counterintuitive. But the problems that complicate our world also provide a canvas on which to paint with what we call an art-inspired outlook. Adaptive, resilient, and transformative. This means we turn volatility into innovation, uncertainty into growth, chaos into ideas, and ambiguity into freedom. With this aspirational approach in mind, we can flip the idea of wicked problems on its head and create wicked opportunities. These are unique and unseen opportunities created by the complex situations presented through wicked problems. In the Wicked Opportunities program, participants will be exposed to the new rules of the 21st century, namely, silo disciplines must give way to a converging of ideas that leads to new and unique actions. Innovation must move beyond incremental iteration to becoming transformative invention. Our decision-making can no longer be based solely on trends and big data, but on skills of pattern recognition and sense-making. When you take part in Wicked Opportunities, you will learn about emerging issues that are coming together to shape our future. Hear about the new environment of entrepreneurship that is arising. Learn about new tools that help you take immediate action and create new ideas. Get the chance to network with other high-achieving leaders and entrepreneurs to accelerate real-world innovation and build collaborative business solutions. So, ready to get wicked? Then email us to find out more at info@kedgefutures.com.
Thank you, Karen. And that's really part of our advocacy in promoting futures thinking in the Philippines. And it's really all about engaging on futures thinking and foresight and how to engage. It's about joining a community of practitioners. So we have that in the Philippines right now. So moving on, I'd like to share with you the importance of making our framework indigenous and of course looking at the local context. That is why I am introducing this features leadership and governance framework, wherein here, as you can see, we have different handles here. This is all about features leadership and governance. And this framework talks about features thinking as a lens. Another is foresight. Foresight is, of course, a foreign and international framework, but we are localizing it. We are indigenizing it using our values, using our own environment, our culture. And that is Hiraya foresight now. And what is that Hiraya? No, well, I'll explain that later on. And another thing that is incorporated here is the knowledge co-creation called from the management principle introduced by Nanaka in his book Frenetic Leadership. But here, as the wrapping mechanism of this framework, we really need leadership. Leadership is an important handle. No matter how rational we are, we need the artistic side of it. And leadership is an art. It is also a science. So here, frenetic leadership talks about common good. And if we look at common good, we have to take a look at the abilities of a frenetic leader. Why frenetic leader? The abilities or characteristics of a frenetic leader really look at the universal application of leadership style. So here, a leader has the ability to make a good call and make judgment based on goodness, the ability to perceive reality as it is, ability to create the ba. Ba is a Japanese word which means a shared context, ability to articulate the essence into narratives, and the ability to exercise political power to achieve an envisioned story, and the ability to foster phronesis in others, meaning to say that these six abilities are focused on the tacit and explicit knowledge of a leader or of an individual. So the tacit is all about our five senses. It's all about our experiences, our observations, and then we convert this tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge, converting it to concepts, converting it to frameworks, converting it to policies. And by looking at the reality on the ground, then we are seeing real societal problems for that matter. So we need to address that. And if we want to address problems, we need to have actual observation for that matter. And the ability to foster phronesis here, it's the ability to see goodness in each one of us. It's about empowerment. It's about coaching. So it's very universal. It could be transformational. It could be adaptive leadership. It could be any type of leadership. So it's all in the so-called frenetic leadership framework. And what about on the well-being? The well-being really talks about our own values, our own culture. If you look at our constitution, our vision as a country is to build a just and humane society anchored on our values. And some of these Filipino values include bayanihan, balikatan, malasakit, galang, ugnayan, and pananagutan. And in our Philippine Development Plan, we talk about our development thrusts, and one of which is malasakit. Malasakit is about lessening corruption and bureaucratic red tape. So I encourage you in your papers, in your academic journey, include these Filipino values, include Filipino words that would really indigenize and localize our framework and our studies and our basis on how to learn things in our daily lives. So another thing is, of course, our motto, our national motto, as enunciated in 9184. We have the flag and heraldic code for that matter. So it is makadiyos, makatao, makakalikasan, at makabansa. So it's very comprehensive as well. And this side, no, of the framework talks about the well-being of the Filipino people. So again, towards national security, education must include the key areas on common good and well-being. So this is just an indicative framework, but somehow it talks about a bid for a holistic approach to carving out desirable features. So features thinking and foresight are two things that that we need as lens in an education, but it's not about predicting the future. It's about imagining multiple features in creative ways. And how do we do that? We use different tools, and we engage ourselves to different workshops and exercises wherein we develop our creativity and imagination. So if you engage in this kind of activity, it heightens your ability to sense, shape, and adapt to what happens in the years ahead. And futures thinking is an approach used by many governments in Europe, in Asia, and in the US, and in the Philippines, of course. We are also now engaging in this kind of activity. So features is an approach to identifying long-term issues and challenges shaping the future development of a certain policy area. And there we explore the implications for policy development. So in policy process, we don't usually we proceed to the so-called crafting of our agenda, but in features bridge, wherein we combine, or we make a composite framework, we first gather and map intelligence before proceeding to the crafting of an agenda towards legislative bill or enactment for that matter. So in the regarding this approach to identifying long-term issues, one thing that I'd like to share with you also is the study of Hofstede. And in the study of Hofstede, it talks about the long-term orientation of the country. So there are actually a number of indicators there towards development, and there are also different countries in that study, and one of which is Philippines. He made a comparative study. One, of course, is on the long-term orientation, and if we look at the long-term orientation, we rank so low in that in that study of Hofstede. So what I'm saying here is we are in a culture of the so-called short-termism mindset. So that short-termism mindset will not really lead us towards our preferred development, but would rather be somehow an expensive way towards development. So we need to shift to the so-called long-term approach rather than that short-termism mindset. And what's nice in this lens is that, of course, we bring in key agents and stakeholders. So it's for everyone. It's an open space. And if we are in an open space, we can articulate different worldviews. But of course, at the end of the day, with the use of the tools, we have to have that so-called preferred worldview or our preferred feature. And in embarking on foresight exercise, we can generate new ideas, new approaches to a policy or strategy. Not only that, we explore innovative ways of responding to policy challenges, not using the old methodology or old approaches in looking at new problems. If we do that, then the feature is very expensive, and it will result to the so-called total fiasco, or the third kind of error. No, we cannot identify the right problem for that matter. And if we cannot identify the right problem, we cannot give the right methodology or tool in solving that problem. So it's really looking at how creative we are and imaginative we are on solving different problems. And of course, shifting the focus of our leaders, of of individuals towards long-term approach and improve the culture of strategic thinking to be more agile, adaptive, proactive, and future-facing. These are buzzwords that we often hear now, including agility and innovation. But what is agility and innovation? So we need to look at really at the context where we of course act and where we do our daily activities. And by using futures thinking and foresight, we can show or attain thought leadership on a given topic, and that's very important. So we in the education sector, we really need to share or co-create knowledge, and ideas for our learners and for our students. And as you all know, the value of education is the sharing of information and knowledge to each other. That's why I call it knowledge co-creation. And instead of calling students, we have to call you as co-learners, because we share, right, different insights and perspectives. So here we need to identify emerging issues. We need to negotiate uncertainties, articulate scenarios, build scenarios, gather intelligence, map intelligence towards a common vision of our desired or preferred future. And by doing that, we can design robust education policies. I think it's high time for us to break the negative energy that is going around the community, around the Philippine bureaucracy, by really looking at new perspectives, new insights. And you play an important role in doing this. So in foresight and futures thinking, we use different tools. Now, as you can see in the slide, you have backcasting. That's interesting. Our military students last week used this. I introduced this to them, and they were able to really gather and map intelligence and scenarios. And we also have the so-called causal layered analysis, or CLA. It's popular and being used also by ADB, OECD, and World Bank. And there's, aside from that CLA in the organizational level, we also have the so-called inner CLA as introduced by Suhail Inayatullah. We also use features wheel and so-called features triangle and features landscape with our legislative students there from the House of Representatives and Senate, and a lot more. Now, there are so many tools that we can use. So another question here is, given that you have now somehow an idea about future thinking and foresight in a simpler manner, what could be the future for learners towards national security? For this, Karen will share again our Menti slide, and that Menti code is again 67070748. And the question there is, what could be the future for learners towards national security? Right. So you can just key in your insights and perspectives on your on what could be could be the future for learners towards national security, right? Okay. So again, just go to the Menti link, that is www.menti.com, and I get one here. It's collaboration, stability. Yes, collaboration is an important C in the 21st century. And if we look at the institutions of tomorrow, it's really all about the web of partnerships, so web of collaboration. Yeah, collaboration is one. Stability is there, adaptive development, yes, well-roundedness, safety, flexible, strategic, secure. Wow, we got the good answers here. And another thing that's important, of course, the connection, it's complex. Yeah, of course, we have to admit that, and we have to really look at the complexity of the environment and of the issues likewise. And we also have another answer here: strategic. Yes, how are we going to have that strategic direction? And the purpose really of this future thinking and foresight is to look at a strategic direction, mapping of and gathering of intelligence for that matter. Right. So we are receiving a number of entries here. Just keep on encoding your entries, and I'll be sharing again my slide. But before that, I'd like to mention also intellectual strategies. Yeah. You know what? One of the bureau pathologies in the government is of course, not really thinking long term and not being intellectual for that matter. It's stated there in the literature of one of the pillars of public administration, the bureau pathologies in the government, attainable justice, yes, and I got also another answer here: cybernetic oriented. So as I mentioned, in the society 5.0, we need to have that interconnectivity. No? All right, thank you. And then I'll be sharing my slide again. Thank you for sharing that, Karen. And I'll be introducing to you now an example of backcasting as a strategy. And that backcasting strategy is really about beginning with the end in mind of what is your vision, or the vision of what I want. No, and then you have to move backwards. Like, for example, if your time horizon is 2050 or 2080, okay, 2050, let's start with 2050. Your vision of what you want in 2050 is this. And then you have to move backwards from the vision to the present. So you can start with 10 years from 2050. So 2040, then 2030, then 2020, the present. Move step by step towards the vision. So this is the description of backcasting. And of course, in order for you to achieve that vision in 2050, what do you want to do today to achieve that vision? So this is an interesting tool that you can use in gathering and mapping intelligence. And another illustration here, of course, made by my colleague as well, Celine Abelia, who just finished her future studies. She's very young. She's around 23 or 22, I guess. And she just finished college likewise. And I requested her to do backcasting as well. And this is her output for the vision for the youth, youth engagement, youth participation, and youth empowerment. So this is her output, right? Okay, so Hiraya Foresight, as one of the areas in that indicative framework on futures leadership and governance, is an indigenous approach towards a futures ready educators and learners. And what is this all about? I mentioned about Hiraya, right? So Hiraya Foresight. Hiraya is an ancient word, the only word that gives the potential of the future, of tomorrow, to illuminate on the present. And Hiraya is about our kinabukasan. It's about our future. And, Hiraya glows and radiates. Why? Because it subsumes a lot of unexpressed meaning significances and meaning implications. As you all know, we've been colonized for more than 300 years, and we are really fond of using Western frameworks, Western literature. But we are thankful to some of our scholars that really gave meaning to these ancient words, and the indigenization of some of our frameworks were given emphasis also by our scholars. And now we are reviving the so-called indigenization and localization of our frameworks. And one, of course, is Hiraya Foresight. And for us, Hiraya is the most appropriate word to describe our future. So there are some suggested key areas in order for us to really operationalize Hiraya Foresight. One is we have to engage in current trends. We have to be catalysts of change. We need to be an effective communicator. Communication is important in governance. And at the DAP graduate school, when I assumed deanship, we revitalized the curriculum. And one subject that I added there is strategic communication, which is not really part of a classic public administration program. But I find it important to have communication as vital component in public management and public administration. So how are we going to put the right message across is very important. But equally important to all of these tools that we have is, of course, our values, our ethical values for that matter. So we need to be morally upright, and to be morally upright, we need to be socially responsible, and we need also to challenge the norm versus the new norm. Dictated, implied, or backed up by data. And as mentioned earlier in Society 5.0, it's people-centric or citizen-centric. So we look at the factual evidence and also the human dimension for that matter. So I'm sharing with you the nexus of people, policy, and technology. And in people, of course, we need knowledge sharing and empowerment, discipline and individual responsibility, and of course, community engagement. That is really all about our responsibility in our community. And in the business sector, it talks about CVS, or creating shared CSV, rather creating shared value, which is more higher than CSR, or community social response, corporate social responsibility. It's higher than that. And that CSV talks about what the responsibility of corporations to really look at societal problems. So it is not there for profit alone, but it is there to help resolve community issues. And likewise, technologies like strengthen surveillance, contact tracing. During the first few months of COVID-19, we really have to strengthen surveillance and contact tracing. Now we are on our almost second year. We have to improve the system that we have now in order for us to be ready for the next pandemic. So we need to use artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and other technological tools that are necessary for sound policy decision making. So for policy, the home of policy really is public administration and public management, but it is an interdisciplinary field. So anywhere it can be there. But for now, in the Philippines, we are looking at public administration as the home of futures thinking. So in policy making, we need futures thinking, strategic foresight, and future-ready strategies. And of course, we need to have evidence-based decision making. Right. So imagination is the currency of the future. While knowledge is the new oil, imagination is the currency of the future. We have to remember that. And by doing futures thinking and foresight, we also have to remember the 5 R's. And these 5 R's include rethinking our education system, reframe the way we think, the way we manage. We have to retool our policies. We have to retool our office memorandum circulars. We have to reskill. So we have to relearn and learn according to Toffler, right? And reskilling is an important area to look into, especially in this 21st century era. But of course, we need to re-energize. Re-energize is about productivity, to be effective and efficient, looking at the traditional or classical public management values, like the 3 E's: efficiency, effectiveness, and economy, we also have to look at the contemporary values: intergenerational fairness, innovation, agility, strategic foresight, futures thinking, right? And with that, we need to re-energize for us to be productive. We have to take care of our mental health and personal needs so that we'll become productive citizens of this country, right? So the last, I think this is the last Menti session that I'd like to ask. What is your preferred feature for educators and learners towards national security? So again, Karen will be sharing the screen and the same link to that question, www.menti.com, and the code is 67070748. What is your preferred feature for educators and learners towards national security? So this is all about us, educators and learners, and that we want to achieve something that is our preferred feature towards national security, right? And in the chat box, of course, we have a number of questions. Okay, and from Miss Zara, ang Pilipinas po ay isa sa may mga pinakamagandang mga pinapatupad na batas. However, nawawala po ang ngipin ng batas. How can we solve this po? Kaya po kaya? All right. Yes, no, that's the usual problem. We have good policies, well-crafted policies for that matter. And ang nangyayari po, yung mga nasa implementing dilemmas and challenges, doon natin nakikita. And ang isa doon sa nakikita ko talaga ay ang hindi pagsama, no, ng mga policy implementers doon sa crafting ng agenda. So dapat, no, as early as possible, nandun pa lang tayo sa gathering and mapping of intelligence, kasama na si implementer. Kasama na siya doon sa pag-craft. Kasi pag hindi siya kasama doon, usually hindi naiintindihan ng implementers yung pinaka-objective ng polisiya, no, at bakit natin ini-implement yon. So that's my rapid analysis actually when I had this presentation on the implementation dilemmas, no, and challenges. We can resolve this together, no? Kailangan talaga yung collaboration of stakeholders, no? Yan. All right. So I'll read some of the questions here in a while. And yes, we got entries here. Filipinos would unite and work together towards one goal. Yes. And towards one Philippines. Sana we can make one strategic direction na, no? Right now we are now crafting ways on how to make one strategic direction, no? Huwag nating hintayin yung June 2022. Dapat mag-start na tayo. I would like to make the concept and importance of national security be understandable and yes, relatable even to ordinary people. Totoo yan, no? Kasi pag sinabi mong security, national security, parang concentrated lang siya sa certain group. What about those at the grassroots level, diba? So kailangan talagang maintindihan in a simpler term, ano bang ibig sabihin nun? No? Yes, I like that. No, that's very inspirational. Ability to make sense of new worlds, work hand in hand to support and implement the policies on national security. Yes, make sense of new worlds here. And work hand in hand, freedom to express our thoughts, stronger support from the government. Yes, that is about learners agency. No? So sana the education system or sector will really implement the so-called learners agency or the so-called co-agency likewise. No? Co-agency for educators and for learners. And educators, openness to listen to other, yes, to the opinion and and the freedom to address their personal opinion towards issues, learners, freedom to express their opinions without risking, it's an open space now. So we need to create more open space in order for us to address that. And educators must be open to all these areas wherein we can address, articulate our rights and interests without prejudice, of course. All right. So maybe Karen, you can move higher. All right. All right. Okay. Anyway, sige. So we will see all other answers later on. No, but yeah, if we can move higher, are there more? Okay. All right. People would have the growth mindset, have their voices heard, and knowledge would go beyond borders. And I'd like to make a point here on mind setting. In one report of the United Nations, it talks about changing mindset as a strategy towards sustainable development. And in that article, maybe Karen can share the link to that United Nations report. And our framework on governance was included in that report. And it says there that we need to change our mindsets towards development. And how are we going to do that? So it's a toolkit on how to change mindset. And of course, it includes behavioral science and all, but it talks about digital mindset, foresight mindset, a lot more. So we can share with you that document. I hope it will be helpful to all of you, wherein you can share that also to other stakeholders, because changing mindset is now the strategy towards sustainable development. And the United Nations mentioned that it's no longer about laws, it's no longer about policies, because with all these laws and policies that we have, it's all about complying, just to comply with the mandate. So what we need now is genuine reform, and in that genuine reform, we need to change mindset from fixed mindset to growth mindset, for that matter. Okay, we also have questions here from how can General Guide there. How can our young and future leaders practice future thinking and foresighting? How could be a robust foundation for them to have the ability to think that way? Yeah. Another thing that we are proposing right now is really to embed future thinking and foresight in the education system, in our curriculum. Although we have constraints because of the system, we need to, undergo a lot of bureaucratic requirements before we can change our curriculum. But initially, and informally, we can include that in our teaching. Like for example, I'm teaching public administration. Even in the ethics side, I include future thinking and foresight. We just need to contextualize that. And in our public management module with our military students, we have included already future thinking and foresight. So we need more champions to include, because there are few practitioners and there are few educators who are into foresight and future thinking right now. So we need more so that we'll be able to introduce that across bureaucracy. But one thing that I want to share with you also is the initiative that we have with the Commission on Higher Education. Now we have champions there, and we initiated this collaboration with them so that they will be able to introduce this in different state universities and colleges. And another thing is we're working with Senator Pia Cayetano, and she's arranging an institutionalization of future thinking by providing really funding for this kind of activity. Yeah, I would like to have more concrete long-term plan than, can we go up a little, Karen? Plan than a band-aid solution that has its roots on ordinary citizens. Yes, we need to have long-term plan, right? We need to have long-term and strategic direction so that we'll be able to dismiss the so-called bahala na system. No, bahala na system, aningas kugon. So these are values that we want to change. No, these are mindsets that we want to change from short-termism to long-termism. And I want to say that future thinking and foresight are not the only tools that we have in solving all of these problems. So we need to really look at the bigger picture. And by looking at the bigger picture, we'll be able to look at the real problems, not the root cause of the problems. All right. Promote that freedom of expression, social responsibility should always be together, especially that media platforms are influential. Yes, the so-called social dilemma, right? And balancing of freedom of expression and understanding importance of national security. Yeah. So if I have to sum this up, really we have to look at national security as an understandable framework for everyone. Na kailangan maintindihan po ng lahat kung anong ibig sabihin ng national security. Thank you, Karen, for sharing that. And I'd like to share my screen again. And thank you for answering what is your preferred feature for educators and learners towards national security. That was those answers were really insightful. All right. So we have to connect likewise the discussion of national security and sustainable development goals so that we'll be able to create sustainable results of today for tomorrow. So it is now, it's now the right time to really map and gather intelligence for a better future. From OECD, what are the advantages of foresight? Well, of course, three, better anticipation, policy innovation, and future proofing or features ready for that matter. And here, this is the framework introduced by Wake and et al. And this is about FFT and sustainable development education. So we need systems thinking, interpersonal competence, anticipatory competence, strategic competence, and normative competence for that matter. And if we have to compare that SDE to FFE competence, we have this. Now that's from Europe. And we need to have anticipatory competence like possible features, looking at creativity, probable features, looking at logic, and preferred features, looking at normative. So these are some of the competencies that we need to look at too from that framework. So again, it's high time to rethink education and learning. From UNESCO, the bigger question really is what will the world look like in 2050 and what role can education play in shaping the future? So from UNESCO, we need to reimagine knowledge, education, and learning in this VUCA world or tuna world, as we mentioned it. And the way we look at education is really about the humanistic approach to education and development, and it must be grounded in a vision of development. And when we talk about development, we talk about national security, right? So it's the holistic kind of development. It's not only about political development. It's not only about cultural. It's not only about economic development, but the entire thing on development, and that is national security. So we have to acknowledge the diversity of knowledge systems, of different worldviews, and of conceptions of well-being. And of course, we need to affirm a common core of universally shared values. We need to have that integrated approach learning mechanism so that we'll be able to include everyone. Knowledge and the knowledge for the future must be inherently plural. That's why features, it's always features, not only future, because there are so many features and we have to have our preferred feature for that matter. So in the document of UNESCO, there's a shift from, of course, from school management to learning leadership in school, from education finances or school equipment to learning resources and learning environments, from teachers as teaching force, it should be teachers as professionals of learning, from assessment of learning to tests and examinations as assessments for learning, from technology as a way of replacing teachers. It means that technologies as means of liberating learners. And I'd like to connect this locally to the Senate resolution that was endorsed by Senator Pia Cayetano last May 21, 2020. That is Senate Resolution number 413, And one of the word assessed there talks about futures thinking. And futures thinking allows for a systematic assessment of the education system and the development of strategic responses towards the effective delivery of education in light of the new or better normal, while enabling new competencies in teaching, establishing collaborations, and facilitating technology and innovation. So this is one of the results of our collaboration with the Senate Committee on SDGs, Innovations, and Futures Thinking. And one of the presentations that we shared with them is really about looking at innovation and taking risk, because we are always imprisoned by our fear of change because of systems, because of culture, no? And so on and so forth. So in a society 5.0, we talk about regenerative society. And we need to embed culture, values, ethics, and nature. And that is really looking at the intergenerational responsibility doctrine, or the intergenerational fairness principle for that matter. And our response likewise is to develop green education system, developing new competencies in teaching, establishing international collaboration, because as I mentioned, this is about multilateralism, this is about collaboration, and we need to protect our environment, and that is facilitating green technology and innovation. So again, this in response to that, this is the framework that we presented to them, to the Senate Committee. A strategic foresight is there, but the green education is also there, and we connect this to SDGs, because we need to achieve and realize the 17 goals that we are part of. Another important thing, of course, is the framework of OECD, and this is about a shared vision 2030. And this shared vision talks about the so-called learners agency, wherein we provide new solutions in a rapidly changing world, broader education goals, and a broad set of KSA and values in action. And in looking at the OECD framework 2030, future-ready students need to exercise agency, which I mentioned earlier, in their own education and throughout life. So agency means that it is a sense of responsibility to participate in the world, and in so doing, to influence people, events, and circumstances for the better, meaning to say that you have to be part of this community, active participants for that matter. And co-agency is the interactive, mutually supportive relationships that help learners to progress towards their valued goals. So teachers and learners for that matters, or educators and learners for that matter. And what are the competencies that we need? Creating new value, reconciling tensions and dilemmas, and taking responsibility. So these are some of the key concepts and key areas that we need to look at too when we talk about co-agency and agency learners. So we'll send this slide to you for more, for really looking at what is this co-agency for that matter, or the so-called ecosystemic change that the OECD is promoting. So in the Philippines, we are now on our more than 20 months of democratizing futures thinking, and we have really democratized that through knowledge co-creation. We have created a number of knowledge content, which we can share with you from the website of Philippine Futures Thinking Society, and also from the website of DAP Graduate School, because one of the banner programs that we introduced is the certificate course on futures thinking. And we were able to capacitate a number of undersecretaries and assistant secretaries, likewise our military students, and the youth. Now we have a program with the National Youth Commission, and likewise with some local government officials, particularly at Region 4A. And some of our students who enrolled in the certificate course on futures thinking are now moving towards higher level, which is on deepening features. And I'm also glad to note and share with you that our state university colleges, state universities and colleges presidents joined us in the certificate course. They brought their management team to really learn about future thinking and foresight, and they used that during their management committee strategic orientation and strategic direction in their annual planning. So we are now on deepening features, and maybe later on, once we are ready, we can institutionalize features. And there are so many government agencies that would like to create their futures thinking offices, but then what we are telling them is there's no shortcut to the future. You have to start with Futures Thinking 101. No, you cannot just right away create or build a futures thinking office and then later on it will be an empty space because you don't have that soft culture. No, you don't have that soft knowledge on what is futures thinking all about. All you have is your structure, and that will be an expensive future for all of us. So don't waste money in just in creating a center for futures thinking without learning first the basic about futures thinking. So that's our advice to them. So right now they are into getting courses on futures thinking, and they need to embrace first the culture on how to embed that in their institution. It's not all about the mandate. It's not all about compliance. It's really all about changing the mindset. Changing the mindset and the culture. So institutionalizing the features once we are ready, and of course later on we can harvest that. So towards my conclusion, why Hiraya? Hiraya Foresight. So as I mentioned earlier, we've been colonized, but then we need to harness and build a futures thinking framework for the education sector by really looking at our rich culture and our social context. And that is really about localizing and indigenizing foresight and futures thinking. And it is only through going back to our indigenous roots that we find local wisdom in our own country. So how are we going to start? Or cultivate FFT, start small, and then later on have a central unit if needed, and then use indigenous concepts like Bayanihan and Hiraya in the Philippines. So if I have to sum up and cluster the competencies that we need towards national security, then there are a lot of competencies, but to sum it up, there are two. We need to be frenetic leaders, we need to be wise leaders, and we need to be a futurist leader, meaning to say that a futurist is someone who is anticipatory and always looking forward towards a better future. So we need frenetic and futurist educators towards learners who are ready in embracing national security and a preferred future for that matter. So I'd like to end that as we democratize futures thinking in the Philippines, it is now the right time to discover and tap our own local knowledge and wisdom. Thus, Hiraya Foresight becomes a suitable indigenous base of futures thinking. So that ends my my sharing with you this morning. I hope you learned something from this shared knowledge co-creation activity. Maraming salamat po sa inyo lahat. On to you, Camille.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lizan. And indeed, we learned a lot today about how imagining a creative future together as a country would definitely lead us towards development. And probably unlike what we're doing in our government right now, that per administration, as we change administration, we also somehow change the future that we imagine together. So really hope that there would be some continuity in that sense, so that we could have like we could continue the goals that we've set for the future for our country, especially in the education sector. It's also very interesting that how futures thinking can help transform wicked problems that seem like that doesn't seem to have solutions into wicked opportunities. So thank you so much, Dr. Lizan. And
Yeah, sorry, Camille, you're muted. Kindly unmute.
okay, so before we proceed, I would like to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A icon on the bottom portion of your screen. So now let us get to know more insights from the reactor of our webinar series. So for those who attended our first session, you must know him already. But for those who just joined us today, our reactor is the president and founder of the International Development and Security Cooperation. He is previously the executive fellow and the vice president for research at the Development Academy of the Philippines. He is an associate professor and course director at the National Defense College of the Philippines and the senior lecturer at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. In addition, he is a fellow of the People's Liberation Army National Defense University in Beijing, China, and at the same time, a fellow at the U.S. Department of State on National Security Policy Making, hosted by the University of Delaware. He has presented papers in various international academic fora, both locally and internationally. He is none other than Dr. Chester Cabaza.
Thank you very much, Camille, for the kind introduction. And of course, to my dean, Dr. Lizan Perante-Calina, you have a very comprehensive, profound presentation there. And also, I would like to greet Vanguard, Dr. Kenneth Go, for the invitation, and definitely to all the UP Vanguards. It's so nice to listen to this powerful presentation. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I'm going to have an impromptu reaction based from the presentation of Dean Lizan, because basically all of he taught us today are very timely and important basically. And what we have to understand here are the tools that he imparted to us. And basically she also gave us some framework on how to realize these tools on foresights, backcasting, and definitely taught us about the frenetic leadership and indigenizing it into Hiraya, and how are we going to use that in view, of course, on how to construe national security. Basically when we start dreaming, we have to think about the future. And I think that is very innate to all humans. We dream a lot because we want to foresee what would happen in the future. And basically, in this comprehensive, profound discussion of Dean Lizan, she gave us a very nice presentation on how to understand education as a must to understanding national security. And basically, when we talk about security education here, it is the process of exposing the learner to the knowledge using the values, skills, experiences included in the concepts of security, which are necessary for citizens to achieve comprehensive national security. Last session, we discussed about the concept of national security, basically, and how it would help us understand some of the key security problems that we have in the Philippines. But now we are given a new tool on how to achieve this security. And with all those discussions given to us by Dr. Lizan on understanding the wicked problems and pursuing wicked solutions also can help us understand why education is very important and how to achieve it. Basically, we must understand that, of course, education is subjective here, because, of course, in some other countries, it depends on how formalized education can be construed. Now that we are in the education 5.0, where technology are adamant and very important, basically, it gives us a view on how to look at the changing environment, because that, as we discussed last time, security also is VUCA, and now we understood it in other terms like tuna. So there are many terms there, but we are talking using one language here, which is security, basically. And it's very anthropological because it talks about us, humans. And as Lizan transitioned from her discussion about national security, imparting to us the nitty-gritty of human security, it tells us how policies are important, which she presented about the national security policy, in which case we see the fulfillment of national vision. And it's all about dreaming again, because once you have that vision, you always think of the future. And basically, it's about how do we safeguard our national interests that include the protection of the people, their way of life, welfare, well-being, and strengthening the country's democratic institutions and safeguarding its territorial integrity. Those were embedded in the national security policy as part of our reimagined society. And that is what we want to have, a strengthened, broadened Philippine society. And basically, how do we achieve it? And it was also presented in the presentation of Dr. Lizan about the focuses of these policies, basically looking at governance, which she profoundly explained about that. Because at the nexus of the development and security, you have to look at the governance and the key players in that governance, which identified which we are part of that, including students, leaders, and other institutions, basically. And of course, delivery of basic services. We know for a fact that people secede, revolt because of the insecurities. And the mere fact that we have to deliver basic services is also a manifestation of how are we going to secure national security, basically. Because it's a moment of insecurity when we don't have those basic services. That's the reason why people go out. In the story of the out of Africa theory of our ancestors going out of Africa, because it's an old story why our OFWs are also going out of the Philippines because of the security for food, housing, education, and so on. They really have to secure their family and of course their country. It's an old story that we keep on narrating in the past and at the present, and we will see that in the future because of the vulnerability and complexity of our society and the world, basically. And of course, she discussed about the economic reconstruction and sustainable development, which we saw in her presentation on the security and development. And as she profoundly discussed to us about the futuristics, the foresights, basically, and the different futures, because it depends on how you perceive future. It's very cultural because depending on the needs of an individual and of every nation and country, basically. And lastly, the securities sector reform, which we saw that this is the thing to do. We have to keep on reforming because in that culture of innovation, there should be reformations, changes. And she mentioned about the mindsets. How do we do it, basically? And definitely, as we try to summarize all of the many good points, ideas, key concepts, and also the frameworks presented by Dr. Lizan, it's so nice to listen to her presentation. It's very interactive also, and you were part of those discussions, which I really like it because while she discussed it efficiently, effectively, we were there also, participating and giving our thoughts. And that is so nice because basically it's about us that we are discussing here. We are part of the academy, you as students, basically we as educators, and how do we present security and national security, basically. And definitely in that human security, it means protecting the fundamental freedoms. And she presented those freedom from want, which is an economic need, freedom from fear, which is basically a safety and security problem, and the freedom of what's the other one of there's one on the third pointer, no, which I forgot. dignity.
Indeed.
With indignity, which is all about humanity. How do we preserve human rights and so on? These are very cerebral and definitely when we talk about the security, I told you last time, it's not only about the mindset, the state of mind, but also it's about the feelings. And it's very holistic basically because it talks about us humans, about our mind and heart. And that is very powerful. And the way she presented it in a systematic scientific way is very commendable because when we translate it to human narrative, it's so easy to understand now because it guides us into a more elevated intellectual discussion. But of course, we have to translate it in such a way that all of us will have to understand it. That's the reason why we have these discussions, discourses, and dialogues basically, because we want to talk and discuss about these things that are very highfalutin for everyone. So we have to cascade those ideas into such a way that everyone is there and definitely it is inclusive for everyone, regardless of the educational attainment and of course your socioeconomic standing definitely. That's the reason why I keep on telling you when we talk about education, it's not only about the formalized education that we get it from the universities. I remember one time when I had my master's or PhD in my PhD program, I enrolled in Asian philosophy. And in that subject, we were only 3 students there. And my professor in that course was talking only about one scholar, one philosopher, Krishnamurti, an Indian philosopher who did not even enroll or was not able to get a formalized degree. And in the books and the videos that he presented to us, written by his disciples from his teachings, basically, because he was there talking without blackboards. He was just talking under the tree. And it was so, it's so very powerful that without any formalized education, he keeps on talking about everything under the sun. And people would gain a lot of knowledge. In the ancient world, the king of India is the king of knowledge. That's the reason why, if you've seen that movie, Eat, Pray, Love, something like that, the actress there went to India. No, the actor who played that role went to India because of that desire for knowledge. And basically, this is what we're talking about. Dr. Lizan talked about that knowledge, learning, and education. Although those phases are different from each another, but they are complementary. So you see the jointness of everything there, which she was talking about the collaboration, the partnership. And of course, in the military, we are now talking about the jointness of the different services, which we should understand. That's why in the government, you have the concept of the whole of nation approach, which is very security centric, basically. Because at the end of the day, if we don't work together and we work in silo, and that's going to be the problem. That was the main question of our participants here. How do we achieve it? Given all those bright ideas that were presented earlier, how do we translate it? It's the culture of enforcement. It's the culture of implementation. That's what lacking to us, basically. No, we know for a fact that in Southeast Asia, even our neighbors in ASEAN are blown away with our bright ideas. They copy our ideas. But when it comes to implementation and enforcement, we are the laggards so far. And that becomes a problem. So we need now a generation who can act and who can lead. Someone who has critical minds. And that is Education 5.0, which Dr. Lizan presented to us. And you as UP vanguards, you have advanced minds. That's why you are vanguards, advanced guards. You should have that ahead of the curve ideas and implement it properly. That's why you have the training to have discipline. And once you have that discipline, because we are talking about values also, then you can implement it properly. We know for a fact that it's very complex. And sometimes the problem here is the system, which is corrupted. But when you have that dream, it starts with future, because every one of us has a dream. And we cannot stop by just standing there or sitting in one side. We have to dream, keep on dreaming, basically. That's the reason why it's so nice to listen to the presentation, because it talks also about the UNDP Human Development Report on the universality of this education and security. It's people-oriented now because it's human security. Last time we talked about the state centrism of national security. Now we are now in this shifting paradigm shift of security on human-centered security. And definitely it's interdependent because we need each other. And also the reason why we have these foresights, backsides, all these forms of tools here for us to have an early prevention. The reason why you have the 9/11, it changed the contours of the international security. Because at the time, the Americans forgot how to see the future. And they were just alarmed and disgusted and infer that non-state actors can suddenly attack them. These are terrorists. They used to think that only nations can attack them. But because of the changing nature of our environment and because of the lack of foresight, they had a problem with their homeland security. And now they started looking at the future. It's a vision, basically. We're like manguhula here. But of course, with the frameworks taught to us and tools given to us by Dr. Lizan, there's a science and art behind it. No, it's like in strategy making and also in security. There's no formula because basically it's an art and science. Just like in leadership, as Dr. Lizan told us, and also in dreaming, it depends on how you interpret it and on how you act on it. Now, remember in the biblical times, early signs for futures would be through dreams. And now our scientists, even in pre-biblical times, they use that as a sign to look for the future. And it's a eureka for them. If they invent something, innovate, and how they implement it, how it impacts to people, that is more important. That's why we need a pool of vanguards who could dream. It starts with dreaming because we want to project what do we want to see in the future. It's all about what we want. That is a basic question. And then we answer those freedom from fear, freedom from want, and freedom from indignity. So you see the interconnection of education and national security. They are complementary. They need each other, interdependent. And we are part of those. Dreaming and of course, basically about those variables there. And lastly, for my point here, of course, it was taught to us about the elements of human security. And definitely there are 7 of which are presented by UNDP here. They're about economic, environmental, food, health, political, personal, community, basically. And in the presentation, there are many black swans, black elephant, and black jellyfish there. These are just some of the tools on how we would interpret. Because basically, with the complexity of our human minds and being the most intelligent animal in this planet, we have many ways of how to interpret things, given the interdisciplinarity of national security and of the many disciplines. Given your own expertise and niche in the future, you will have to think, and maybe you would become respective mothers and fathers of your own disciplines. You will create your own disciplines. Who would thought that I would create security anthropology? Because of the exposures, because of the visions, because of dreaming, and so on. One of you later on will have to become innovative and become leaders and will have create its own niche basically. So what I'm trying to drive at here is that we keep on dreaming. And once we dream, we also implement it and think of its impact to the society. So I hope that we will have more interactive Q&A here. I know Dr. Lizan will be there ready to answer your heavy questions. And I'm here also to support. So thank you once again. Maraming salamat. Back to you, Nico
Okay.
Camille.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Cabalza, for your reaction and breeze through to the presentation of Dr. Lizan. And indeed, personally, I have learned a lot as well with the presentation of Dr. Lizan on how to actually bring down in a small scale, like how to apply for futures thinking in my personal life, and how all of us, if we apply futures thinking in our individual lives, we can all contribute to a better and brighter future for our country as well. So let us proceed to our Q&A portion. So we have some questions here on our chat. Okay. From Vanguard, Audrey Gaite again. What could the daily practical use of futures thinking and foresighting in the daily lives of our young students be? And what could be the What could be the daily and practical use of futures thinking and foresight in the daily lives of our young students? There you go. So
Yeah, the practicality of foresight and futures thinking. Well, actually, foresight or futures thinking is a personal innate ability, right, of an individual. As I mentioned earlier, it's not for experts only. It's for everyone, But the difference there is on how we practice it, on how we use it. So of course, at the education system, formal education for that matter, we are given tools, right? We learn tools, we learn different key concepts and key areas on how we use futures thinking at the organizational level. But we always look at 3 levels. First, on individual, then organizational, and then society. I always mention this, that if we are introduced to management and leadership skills, we always have to look at the practicality of it. Like, for example, I just want to give you an example. In Japan, the Japanese engineers were exposed to the so-called management principles in the United States. They were taught these management principles. And after learning these management principles, they brought it to Japan. They operationalize it and they contextualize it. So in contextualizing that, they introduce the so-called total quality management. And from the total quality management, they further introduce 3 areas. JIT, just in time. So another is the Kaizen, the 5S, right? We use the 5S. Then the other one, the Ikishawa fishbone analysis. So from the JIT, JIT means just in time. If you have meetings, you have to come on time, at least 5 minutes before the meeting, not 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Now, that's the rule. And then another thing that you can use JIT is when you present, when you do reports. Like if you're given 7 minutes, it should be 7 minutes. And I was so happy actually during our management module with our military students. And when I told them about JIT and you only have 7 minutes and they finish right in time, they say it JIT. So all the comments in the chat box was the time JIT. So that's one. And of course, first in, first out of the documents. And in our practical lives, in our refrigerator, in our pantry, for example, JIT also. First in, first out of our of our grocery items. No, so those old items in the refrigerator must be all already in front. No, when we try to add another new items for that matter. So that's GIT, that's practicality. No, so they use this in their daily lives. No, and in foresight and futures thinking, what we can do, of course, we have to always be anticipatory. Being anticipatory is not only about being anticipatory in our offices, in our daily lives. No, we plan for the future, and like for example, supplies in grocery items in our respective homes. So when you stock supplies, rice, for example, no, what do you call that? Your gas stove supply, your gas, for example. So you have at least two. No, if the other one is empty already, you have a reserve. So that's foresight and futures thinking. Our little ones at home, they're also on that, no, because they often hear me saying about futures thinking and foresight, so they already apply that in their daily activities. So there's really practicality in applying foresight and futures thinking. It's not only all about scientific tools in the formal education, but also in our daily activities and a lot more. The values really include, of course, malasakit should be there, no, galang, respeto, pananagutan, accountability. No, but I'd like to emphasize that when we use futures thinking and foresight, it's about the ethical dimension of that, because no person would like to recommend wicked solutions for a better future. So it's really about the ethical dimension of it. Yeah. Thank you.
Dr.
Yeah,
Chester.
yeah, of course, yeah. Thanks for that, Dr. Lizan. No, if I may add also, definitely when we start talking about the futuristics, no, and the foresights, basically, no, it boils down on how we were trained also in our house, in our families, and of course in the universities, basically. But technically, what I'm trying to drive at here is that we have our own individual dreams, and of course, like what Dr. Lizan told us about the organization and for the country, basically, and with those hierarchy of needs there, and with the maturity also of how we want our dreams and wants to be realized. There is a certain a quote there that sometimes Filipinos have the tendency to look at the unknown of the future because we don't have that culture of vision. We lack that culture of looking beyond what is present, because right now we are only looking at the basic needs at present. We tend to forget what do we want in the future. Like say, for example, every before the end of the semester, I usually ask my students, how do you see the Philippines 10 years or 15 years from now? You will lead this country. And rarely do I see my students raising their hands so confident that they would say that the Philippines would be a more progressive country because of that fear they see. Then what do we see there? Looking at the backcast, they see a lot of problematic organizational problem. Like you see corruption, poverty, malnutrition, and so on. A lot of security issues there. Then how do you have that confidence to see a brighter future if at present you see that kind of reality? Then let's turn around that mindset. Now I ask my students, 15 years from now, how do you see yourselves as leaders? Then we train them how to think. This is what we will do. This is what I should be doing, and so on and so on. Then that kind of a narrative will change basically. And also looking at the variables and some factors. Where do we see the Philippines by 2020, 2030 and 2050? Economic-wise, it's going to be a brighter future for the Philippines because by 2050, the Philippines will become the 16th largest economy in the world. Looking at those variables there and changing now the different systems and the bureaucracy basically will will give us a brighter future of how we see the future. And that is the practicality. Once we ask students what they want and challenge them, how will they transform our society, basically. That's my answer for that, Camille.
Thank you, Dr. Chester Cabalza. Indeed, we should also ask ourselves what our dreams are and what we want to achieve, and then after that we could backcast on and apply backcasting on our own lives as well. So we have another question. How do the youth acquire values and even be a part of oh wait, sorry. I think we have already answered this question. Yeah, there you go. What kind of basic values that our students should develop in order for them to live futures thinking and have foresight thinking?
Yeah, I'll go first, Dr. Chester. Yeah, for the basic values, actually, this is my point as always. No, for the basic values, we always have to look at our constitution, the preamble. It's there, state is there. Now, in order for us to build a just and humane society, it talks about these values. Of course, love of country, nationalism, and patriotism. If we just zero in on nationalism, then it will redound to all other values. Now, if we have that love of country, we love our country, then we will be able to look at other values. Malasakit, no, galang, ugnayan, pananagutan. Diba? Pag mahal natin yung ating ng ating bansa, talagang titingnan natin, kailangan natin maging malasakit. Kailangan natin talaga ng respeto. Kailangan natin ng pananagutan. Etong pananagutan is about the accountability. No? It's not only about our accountability in our organization, accountability in our institution, but it talks about our individual accountability as a responsible citizen. No, ano yung mga dapat nating gawin para sa ating bansa, no? And I'd like to talk also about the so-called developing our soft power. I think I mentioned this to Dr. Chester as well. No, yung soft power, it's about really again looking at our values, our culture. No, for us to develop the so-called soft power. So it's again revisiting local wisdom, no, local values. And what are these local values? As I mentioned, no, kasama na rin yung balikatan dyan, kasama yung ugnayan, yung respeto, malasakit, no, and among others. And I'd like to connect that also to another question, which is the context is also the same. No, what do you think is the most important trait of an educated mind, or in your opinion, what are the three most important traits that we can learn from a truly educated person? Now, so education is not about the what do you call this? No, it's not about the titles that you get from your university. You be a doctor, medical doctor with PhD, an engineer, a lawyer, or so on and so forth. No, it's about giving value to that, and by giving value to that, it's really about taking responsibility. That's very important, especially in this era, taking responsibility. And what are the values that you need in order for you to take responsibility? But before I share the 3 points now that you were asking, I'd like to mention that at the end of the day, relationship matters. So importante po yung yung social capital na tinatawag natin, no? Your relationship. So these 3 values that we need, especially in this 21st century era as educated individuals, we need to co-create knowledge sharer. Because what we learn from the institution, from our schools, universities, is if we just kept to ourselves, that's nothing. That's not knowledge. No, because knowledge is there to be shared. You have to unleash the potential of the knowledge and for us to co-create no, and introduce innovation and agility in your organization. And that will lead to social innovation. And from social innovation, then technological innovation. How can you achieve development? How can you achieve national security if you don't share knowledge? Right? So knowledge share is one. And you have to be anticipatory, always forward looking. No, magastos yung if you always look backwards. Eh? So you have to be forward looking, anticipate what will happen in the next few months, in the next 5 years. And that is really towards development and seeing goodness in others. And that's really about phronesis. No? We have trust issues. Ang taas ng trust deficits natin. So that's part of our culture. No, part of our values. So if we will not see goodness and in each other, and if we'll not foster phronesis, and we always bear in mind the so-called trust issues, then we will not really improve. Bababa at bababa po tayo. So kailangan we have to trust. No? So that is about knowledge sharer, anticipatory, and see goodness in others. Thank you.
Those were beautifully said, Dr. Lizano. Maybe for my part here, it's so nice talking to young people because of their high idealism, basically, and they put high standard when it comes to values. That's why we have to adapt to their changing values also. When we talk about ethics and values, it also changes from generation to generation. I remember when Ateneo and the UP competed from one another because they tried to understand Filipino values back in 60s and 70s because they really wanted to institute what are the Filipino values. And suddenly, after that, nobody discussed about values anymore. Up to now, there are no recent studies. Until such a time in 1980s, you have the damaged culture that talks about Filipino values, and this was written by a foreigner. And all of a sudden, we were like asking who we really are and what are the values of the Filipinos. And I've been teaching Philippine culture and society in UP for like 12 years already, and it's the same old story. It's so sad learning all those colonial era values that we acquired from colonizers, and even up to now, it's like a vicious cycle that we cannot get out from the trap. No, it's so hard sometimes to discuss and teach about this when, in fact, it's the values are lived, and that they are basically present in all of us. And I remember my students last year in that course made a study about the Filipino values in COVID time. And the prevailing values were the same, like utang na loob, bahala na, because those are coping mechanism. And it's so hard because we see, of course, it should be balanced. No, those conditions and the values presented by Dr. Lizan are really aspirational and good. But at the end of the day, we also see the negative side of our values as a wake-up call to what we should be doing, basically, and what should be the collective values of the young people, especially you, because you are 60% of our population. That's very high. And what would the kind of values do you want to project for our nation? So it's a question also amongst us scholars that what do you really want? So it's a wake-up call, especially now that we have the tools of forecasting. How do you see? Because you will lead this country with all those conditionalities of the values that you will present to us. How do you lead the Philippines using the values that you have? It's also a question, and we need a lot of writers, scholars for us to better understand what do we want in the future presented in our values. So it's a very tough question, basically, but we hope that you will guide us because you are the future leaders of this country. Thank you for that.
Yes, and indeed, values that we hold are like anchor for us to keep on, to be committed to our goals, and to be consistent to achieving our goals, as well as stay motivated as well. So yeah, I think these values are very important, especially the love for country, as Dr. Lizan mentioned a while ago. So I have another question here, and maybe probably just one more question. Okay. How can we effectively address and adapt to changes in leadership when conceptualizing long-term plans?
So it talks about adaptive leadership, right? All right. I have few books on leadership which I got recently, and it talks about you don't need to have an organization for you to really promote leadership or for you to lead, right? So that book talks about breaking silos. And another thing which is important, actually Camille mentioned it, it's about anchoring, no? And anchoring is connected to nudging also, and of course that will remove biases, no, for that matter. But yeah, engaging in futures thinking is really about also engaging on continuous capacity building, on continuous learning. So meaning to say, it's all about lifelong learning. We cannot say that we have this so-called long-term thinking already if we just engage in one session in futures thinking or foresight. So when we engage in futures thinking and foresight, we need to have continuing capacity building, continuing exercise for that matter, workshops, no? And how can we embed that in our culture, organizational culture, in order for us to really use it as a leadership tool? No? So it must be really continuous engagement and by and relearning for that matter. No? So we always emphasize, like for example, at DEP Graduate School, no, we emphasize that we are a leadership and management school. No, because we are incorporating leadership and management. And we are always saying that leadership is an important handle. It's an important lens for all of us. And in leadership, we emphasize values there. No? So frenetic leadership for that matter, because for me, I have somehow a bias because I am trained. No, I was trained on frenetic leadership, but I always anchor frenetic leadership in a universal setting. So I am seeing and making composite frameworks that frenetic leadership could be transformational. It could be all other types of leadership, but leadership is based on context. We need to contextualize always. No, we cannot be an authoritarian leader all the time. No, we cannot be an inspirational leader all the time. So we have to contextualize that based on the situation and based on the environment. So as leaders, no, we need to develop the so-called thought leadership value, and being a thought leader, no, being a frenetic leader. For that matter, we need to incorporate futures thinking and foresight, and that's really changing the mindset, no? And that mindset is about foresight. So in foresight leadership or in foresight mindset, we need to incorporate always the way we think and a more broader perspective, ethical perspective, and forward-looking perspective. So that's my answer for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lizan. For me, I always believe that we live in binary opposites. That there, given the complexity, the different colors now in our multiverse world, still we give more benefit to the binary star. Like, say for example, we are now in a pandemic, and Dean Lizan discussed about the Education 5.0, which we think will change how we will conduct education in the future. Now we are into this virtual education. There are now rumors and of course suggestions that by next year there will be blended education. But still, it's a question because just like the Philippines, it's a two-phase. We see binaries here. It's a developed and developing country. So for us in the urban Metro Manila, yes, we can do face-to-face or maybe at this high-tech virtual. But In some other rural places in the Philippines, that's not the reality. So when we think about this future, we have to consider a lot of things also. The future of other spaces that we are talking about. And when we carry on with those highfalutin futures, what about those who cannot understand it? So that's why we need inclusivity. And just like what Dr. Lizan was talking about, that anyone can have that power to have that idea of futuristics. It's just that it's how we train and of course tell it to everyone, the messaging and how to learn and relearn it. Basically, it's a process basically, and sometimes in the process it's very medyo mahirap minsan, no? Because there are many variables and impediments in between there. But ultimately, it's all about institutionalization. It's the election season. And your question is about the long-term effect of all these ideas that we are talking about. You have the power to change now our society. If you choose the best leaders based from your conscience and values who would represent our country in that 6 year, and we hope that policies will not only live for 6 years, but once it is institutionalized, I think the best policies should be implemented properly amongst us, because after 6 years, perhaps most of you are professionals already, and you will be part of the workforce. And your dreams will become into a reality already. So you are part of this process so far. So we want you, because of this dialogue, that polylogue, as I learned from Dr. Lizan, this polylogue that we have here will awaken us, basically, of how education will help us achieve a robust national security, because we are part of that security sector also. And we will use this education as an imperative, a must, for us to achieve that security. We've been discussing it since day one. What do we want? What is our national security? And our dreams and aspirations for that security. And we are part of this process now. We have to wake up, choose our best leaders, use your values, your conscience, and challenge everyone. So I think I will end it that way. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
Camille,
you.
if I
Yes,
may,
ma'am.
I just
Sure.
want to add something briefly, no? And this is really based on a practical experience. You know how powerful education is. Very, very powerful. And inside the classroom, we have co-learners, right? And these co-learners are from different government agencies. They're working for their respective principals. And learning from a four corner of a room, they have also their insights and perspectives. And these co-learners who happen to be managers and planners likewise, who are also module director for that matter in their respective agencies, have already applied some of their learnings from that four corner of the room. One example is, of course, this one, frenetic leadership. No? And some of my students really applied frenetic leadership in their respective organizations. And another thing is futures thinking. And you as co-learners, as co-learners, and later on you will work for your principal. If you are, you gain insights and perspectives now from different professors of yours, you can also give this to your principals. Now you can share this to your principals. So that's how powerful you are. Actually, the power, the learnings of your principals will come from you. It will really come from you. So get moving, be educated, learn a lot, share your insights and perspectives. It's your world. As mentioned by Dr. Chester, you are future leaders. You are the future generation. So it's a G for all of us as your own language, right? So before, I really don't understand what's G, but now I know. So G for everyone. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And also, um, I mean, just by participating, and again, but just by participating with in webinars like this, we get to learn from you, Dr. Lizan and Dr. Chester Cavaza. I mean, it is such an honor to have you guys here, and indeed, we have the power as the future of the country. No, especially as ROTC cadets, we're all our cadets right now. You're all enrolled in ROTC, and that is the first step to actually giving back to our country. And just like what we have in UP ROTC, our shibboleths stands our sorry. Our shibboleths are duty, honor, and country, and we have to uphold that with us even after we graduate from the course, because duty well performed, honor untarnished, and above all, country above self. So there. So I think that ends our open forum. So we are indeed very grateful to be able to learn from our honored guest speakers today. Okay. Okay, so cadets, if you have more questions, you can message us and through our Facebook page here. So please like and follow our page so that you'll be able to be notified as well with our future sessions. So on behalf of the UP Vanguard Makati chapter and the UP Department of Military Science and Tactics, I'd like to present some token of appreciation. So first to our reactor, Dr. Chester Cabalza. Here's our e-certificate. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. We know you have a very busy schedule, but thank you so much that you're able to join us, and hopefully for our future sessions as well. Also, we have Dr. Lizan Perante-Calina. I believe we sent you our token of appreciation there. Thank you so much for participating and for sharing your knowledge with us, especially about futures thinking. That's, yeah. And so to end our session today, before that, okay, cadets, just like our session last time, you have a post-evaluation form. So kindly scan the QR code or go to the link shown on the screen right now. Okay, so let us end our webinar today by singing UP Naming Mahal. mabuhay ang pag-asa ng bayan, cadets. So stay tuned to our announcement on the next sessions, which will resume next year. We have a lineup of interesting topics on national security, just as mentioned by Dr. Chester a while ago. The different elements of national security, we will tackle all of them through our next sessions. Also, they are all very relevant to us now. Just like session 1 and our session today, we have very honorable guests as well who will be sharing their experiences and knowledge with us. So on behalf of UP Vanguard Makati Chapter and UP DMST, we thank you all for your time today. Hope you all have a splendid day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Dean
you.
Lizan. Thank you,
Thank you,
Camille.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Chester.
you,
Thank you,
Dr. Lizan.
Thank you,
General
Dr. Tan. Thank
Gaiti.
you, Dr. Cabalsa.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, Gaiti. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. See you, cadets, on our next session.
Thank you, Camille, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir General Gaite. Thank you.